Hello everyone, my name is Lisa Shaw for Embrilliance today, and I am going to be talking to you a little bit about the Embrilliance Essentials function called Remove Hidden Stitches. It is an Essentials function, meaning that it works when you use existing embroidery designs. It is not a digitizing function. So if you have Stitch Artist and you are wondering how come you can't remove the hidden stitches, that's not a technique for you to use. You'll want to refer to the playlist on the Stitch Artist playlist to learn how to shape your object so that you don't have stitches. The rule is, when you're digitizing, you have complete control over what it is that you're creating. So if you don't want stitches someplace, don't put them there. However, when you are customizing, so working with existing designs, you don't have the same controls as you do when you are creating your own from scratch. So one of the immensely powerful features of Embrilliance Essentials is that when you merge two designs and put them on top of each other, the stitches underneath that are hidden by the design on top are automatically removed when you save your stitch file. So let's pop on over to the software, and I'm going to run through a few different scenarios that show how to use Remove Hidden Stitches effectively. Here we are in our Embrilliance software, and I have an empty design page. So let's talk about how Remove Hidden Stitches was developed to work. Let's go to our Merge Stitch File function. And I'm going to browse to the folder on my desktop that I've created for this video called RHS. And I'm going to select two designs, these two happy little aliens, and I'm going to import them into my design page. Now, as you can see, if I were to just separate my two aliens and have them on my design page, there's nothing overlapping each other. So if I save my stitch file, it's perfectly fine. However, if I were to say move this larger one this way and move my little green happy alien down this way and overlap them so that they become a grouping or a stylized type design, the stitches that are overlapped by the green design will automatically be removed when you save your stitch file. Let's try that. So let me go, and I'm going to move this really close so that you can see there's quite a bit of overlap there. I'm going to go to the Save button here, and I'm just going to call it My Design, and it's going to save the PES and the working file. So I'm going to click Save. Let's close this design. Whoops. Close this design. We're going to go to our Open function, and you'll notice that I have two designs here. My BE working file, which is the file I created in the Embrilliance software, as well as my PES file. Both of these look pretty much the same, but they are significantly different. Let's select the PES file. This is the design that you would normally go to your embroidery machine with. So I select the PES file and click on Open. It opens the design. Now, two things to notice. In my design object list here, I only have one design. So I can't click on my little green alien and move him anywhere because it's grouped. It's already one design. However, when I run the stitch simulator here that shows what would happen at the embroidery machine, you'll see that it's going to stitch out the first alien, and if you notice, part of his belly is missing there, as well as his arm. And that is because those are the stitches that are hidden by the green alien on top. Now, as you saw, all I did was merge my two designs and save my stitch file, and the stitches were automatically removed. Let's close this stitch file here. Not going to save. Open up our BE working file instead. So it's the same looking design, but this is the one we had originally worked on, the one we had merged both designs in. When you have this design open, your working file, you still see your two aliens. I can move this green one aside and look at that. There's still stitches underneath him. That's because Embrilliance does not remove these stitches from your working file only removes them from the stitch file that you send to your machine. That's why it's always important to, when you save your file, to keep your BE working file on your computer. The machine is the only thing the machine needs is the stitch file. So keep that in mind when you're saving your files. The BE working file has some superpowers. Now, a feature in the software so that you don't always have to open the PES file to view and make sure that those stitches were removed. We have a feature here that has a little pair of scissors, and when you put your mouse cursor on top, it says remove hidden stitches. This is a preview button. If you click on this button and move this little guy out of the way, can you see the little hole that's cut out of our pink alien? That's a preview of the stitches that will be removed. However, as soon as I click off and I move this guy around, look at that. All those stitches come back. So that is just a preview. And sometimes another way to check to verify that stitches have been removed is click on this little scissor button, go to your stitch simulator, and run it so that you can see, aha, there's the hole in my alien. So I know that my stitches have been removed, and when I save my stitch file, they will be removed automatically. Now I must tell you that this is done because we have a preference set. The folder at the top that says Show Preferences in your Embrilliance software. When you have this open and you go to the Jumps and Overlays option, when you choose that option, at the top there is a feature and it is selected by default. And this tells the software to remove any hidden stitches automatically in the stitch file. If you happen to turn this off and you save your stitch file, those hidden stitches will not be removed. This is selected by default, but sometimes people turn it off thinking that that is a solution to a problem that they have. Well, we're going to go through a few different examples to teach you different ways on how to solve other solutions of overlapping designs. So let's close this design, get him out of the way. We're not going to save him anymore. And let's look at this situation. I have two designs here. One is a number 8, and the second is a rooster design that I've gotten from Embroidery Library. The number 8 is from Creative Appliques. It is her Applique 5-inch BX file. So this is a lettering object. I created it by clicking on my lettering tool, typing the number 8, and choosing the font from the pull-down list. Now, if you go to your colors button, while I have this 8 selected, we can see that it actually has 4 colors in it because this is an applique. The first color is the running stitch for the material position. The second one is the running stitch that is a tack down. That's going to hold your fabric in place. The third color here is the pink, which is our satin. And the fourth color here, which is white, is a decorative finishing stitch on top. We know that this is an applique also because if we run our stitch simulator, we can see that color number 1 stitches, then color number 2 on top, color number 3, and color number 4. So this is an applique design. Now in Essentials, you have the appliques can also be set to create cut files for your cutting machine. Setting an applique design to be a cut file basically tells the software that this letter, this design here, actually has a couple colors that have jobs. They're not just running stitches. They're running stitches that say the first one is a positioning stitch that says where the fabric has to go, so you need that stitch. The second one is a positioning stitch that's holding the fabric in place. It's the placement stitch holding that fabric there so that if you were to remove your hoop, it has the outline and you trim your fabric around. The fourth is the finishing stitch and then the decorative stitch on top of it. But the first 2 stitches have jobs. So if we select this and go to the color break option, we can give these jobs to those first 2 running stitches. If I left click on the color chip, that's our first color in our design. Normally it comes up with the color thread choice that you have here. At the top of our thread change dialog, there is a button or a tab that says Applique. If you click on this, there's a style pull down where you can choose and give the job to that color of stitches. So this position, this color right here, the black, is our positioning stitch, which will stitch first and tell you where to place your fabric, where your fabric needs to be positioned. Now this feature, when you choose a position, this also allows you to view a simulation of where that fabric's going to be. Now this is important because when you layer appliques or you have a design that has fabric in an applique, sometimes you might forget that there's going to be fabric in here, and if you put something underneath that fabric, it's actually going to be hidden. It might be hidden. Therefore, stitches that are hidden could be removed automatically. So this also gives you a preview of what your cut file is going to look like if you happen to have a cutting machine. And to save your cut file, all you have to do is click on the Save button here and it brings up a dialog box. Remember, there's lots of videos talking about how to create cut files on the Embrilliance YouTube channel. Let's turn off our simulated fabric by clicking on the None. We have our position. We're going to click OK. The second color here has a job as well. So when we go to our Applique tab for that color chip, from the pull down menu, we need to say that this running stitch will be our material holding in place stitch. So it has a job. It just can't be removed if something is hiding this stitch. Okay, so when I click the OK button, that's done. I don't need to make any settings for the top finishing stitch or the other one, because those are, if they're covered, you probably do want them removed because you don't want that extra bump. Okay, you just have to think about these things when you're setting up your jobs of applique using the color chips here. So we've set the 2 position and the materials, and we have our rooster that's on top of this applique design, and he's hiding some stitches. If we run our stitch simulator right now, it's going to stitch everything completely. So let's go back, click on our scissor preview to see what's going to happen when we go to the embroidery machine. When you go on the stitch simulator now, you'll notice that the 8 placement and material stitch are perfectly intact. However, this satin finishing stitch now has a hole in it, or missing stitches, because they've been removed because our rooster design is going to be stitching right on top of them, which eliminates a bump or a bubble in our embroidery and makes a nice flat embroidery design. Again, this is only done in the stitch file because our working file will have the design intact, which allows you to move this around. Now, I wanted to point something very important out, because the remove hidden stitches works as far as layers go. Okay, do you see our number 8 is going to stitch first, and our rooster is going to be on top of the 8. So the rooster is hiding the stitches in the 8. What happens if we right click on the design in our object pane and say move this one first, so that our rooster stitches and then the 8 stitches on top of it? When you click on remove hidden stitches, look at that. Our rooster's missing his belly because the fabric is hiding those stitches, and they are removed automatically when you save your stitch file. Remember, it's not in the working file, because as soon as you move him, his stitches are there. As soon as you save your stitch file, this is what your stitch file will look like for when you go to the machine. Isn't that exciting? And again, this is set in your preferences when you go to your jumps and overlays setting that says treat objects labeled as applique position as filled objects. Very important that you have these two checked so that when you make the changes that we just showed how to make in this part of the video, everything's working as it's supposed to. Stitches are removed as we expect them to be. Okay, so that's a second example of remove hidden stitches. A third example has to do with a lettering object that also has letters that overlap each other. If you notice, in our object pane, we only have one object. So when that object isn't overlapping anything else, it's one lettering object. And this is, again, from Creative Appliques, her sweet applique BX file. But I have adjusted the letters by moving them by using the center dots and moving them, and you can see that some of them do overlap each other. And that is because each letter has a placement stitch, a material stitch, a placement stitch, a finishing stitch, and a second finishing stitch. And you can see that it goes down, those four colors repeat, one for each letter. Now, I can't select colors in my object list. I can select them here in my page, in my properties pane here for the colors. I'm going to show you a shortcut. We know that every single black is going to have a job. And if I right click on that black, I can choose the job from a little pop-up. So I don't have to go to the Applique tab. I can simply right click and choose Applique position. The gray one, right click, that's the material. The black one, right click, position, material, and I can go through each one and choose its job from the little pop-up menu. Have to do each one separately because there's 5 letters in this name. Whoopsie. I'll make sure. Now what's handy here is that when you do right click on it, once you've given it a job, it will show up that color has been given a job. Let me finish this last one so I don't get sidetracked here. If I right click on this black, it says that it's a position. So you can easily double check by just right clicking on your colors. Well, I assigned them all. And if I click on my little preview button, nothing happens. That is because this preview button here at the top only gives you a preview for when you have multiple designs in your object list that are overlapping. When you have a single lettering object that has overlapping letters, you need to go to the Stitch tab here in your Properties pane. Right next to the letters, you'll see Stitch. And there is an option here that says Remove Hidden Stitches. And as soon as you choose that Remove Hidden Stitches option, can you see that it automatically previews so that stitches have been removed from specific letters. And if you move it up, those letters are still filled. They will regenerate themselves. But once you move it down where they're on top of each other, the stitches will automatically be removed so that you won't have lumps in your letters. And that's automatically done when you save your stitch file because your BE working file will always be intact. So that is how you deal with remove hidden stitches when it comes to lettering objects. You must select your lettering object, go to the Stitch tab, and make sure that Remove Hidden Stitches is selected. We had to, because this is an applique, we needed to set each one of the material position and material location. Each one of those stitches needed to be set with their job, and we did that by right-clicking on the color chip to set the positions and the materials. So much with Remove Hidden Stitches, but it's such a powerful tool, and it functions similarly in different ways when you use it in the program. Now, this design, I wanted to go through one more feature of Remove Hidden Stitches because this is also explained in other videos, but I wanted to run through it one more time here. Here is a coaster design. It's an in the hoop design. And when you expand it, you can see that color number 1 is a placement, color number 2 is a position for the cork that you have, then the design stitches through here, and the very last color that's that's going to stitch is it looks like a very heavy bean stitch. So the way that this in the hoop project works is that you have your stabilizer hoop, probably a tearaway stabilizer. You stitch a running stitch and you put your piece of cork or vinyl down. It stitches the tack down to hold that into place, and it stitches the whole design on top of it. Before you take it out of the hoop and stitch the last color, to finish it off, you slide a piece of felt underneath it so that it covers those stitches on the back, and you stitch that final bean stitch so that you can take it out and trim, and you have a nice little coaster that has a finished back to it. What if you want to put an initial in the middle of this design? Okay, let's see what happens when you do that. So first off, I'm going to click on my big letter A here. That puts my ABC. I'm going to change that to my Creative Applique's Penguin Attack, and I'm just going to type in the letter B for a single capital letter, and maybe I need to choose one size larger than that so it feels nice, and it's placed right in the center of my design. However, notice that it stitches after the entire coaster and you've put your backing on, so that's not stitching at the proper time. So what I need to do is I'm going to expand my object list here. I'm going to select the letter B, click, hold, and drag it so that it will be stitching. I can see that line saying where it's going to stitch in my object list. Drop it into place, and look what happens. When I look at my object list here, instead of only having 2 designs, I have 3 designs. Now, think about what we just did. This last design, and I say design because it has a number 3 next to it, is a finishing stitch. And it stitches right on top of the placement and material stitch of the first design. And it will be hiding the stitches. So the number 3, these stitches are hiding the first 2 of this first design here. So when you save your stitch file and go to your machine, what happens? All you have is this little tiny dorky thing at the top, because those first 2 colors were completely removed. And that is because Remove Hidden Stitches kicked in. Let's resolve that. We already know how to do that because we've done it before. We need to tell the software that those first 2 running stitches have specific jobs and cannot be removed. To do that, I'm going to go to this color chip here on the very first color of my design, right click and say this is my applique position. I'm going to right click on the blue and say this is my applique material. Now, those are the only 2 I have to set because those are the only 2 that are hidden. Now when I click on Remove Hidden Stitches, go to my Stitch Simulator, look at that. Right at the beginning, I can automatically see that it keeps my placement stitch and my material stitch intact so that my entire design is going to stitch out properly, and then it's going to finish with the nice heavy bean stitch at the end. No stitches were removed because I told the software that those first 2 stitches had placements, had jobs to do. They had to be a placement for fabric and be a tack down for fabric. Therefore, they were essential and could not be removed. And that is one more way that Remove Hidden Stitches works. So hopefully you found this video useful, showing you different ways that the Embrilliance Essentials function of Remove Hidden Stitches works to help you create smoother running embroidery designs and some tricks to make sure that your designs stitch exactly as you hope they do. Thank you for taking some time to watch this video with me today. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel as there's lots of resources available to you. Thank you.